All right, Joe, welcome back. It is a big week at the time of this recording. It is the week of July 27th, which means we have the most companies by market cap reporting this week. And coming into this week, we had some green arrows in the pre-market as we heard that maybe things in the Middle East are flattening out, if you will. That was immediately sold yesterday. Today, we were little bit lower. Now we're up fractionally higher, but let's narrow our vision on this and talk about what we think is going on. So the first part here is what is stuff rotating out of? I've got the Qs chart here, and as you can see, this chart has rolled over from the previous high. Now, as far as some of the moving averages here, I have this pretty much smack dab between the 50 and between the 200. It almost looks like it's in no man's land. To me, or to my eye, it sure looks like this is going to continue its rollover and possibly tag this 200-day. The last time we tagged the 200-day, we actually dipped beneath it, gapped back above it, and went on a superb run. So I think moving down to the 200-day should set up some better moves in some of these tech names. What do you think here about the Qs?
It does look like the Qs are heading lower. Fortunately, today it does appear like there is some strength in the buying, and we're getting a little bit of a lift. We potentially could end up with a reversal candle here. We also had the RSI fairly low, not quite an overbought state yet, but still low enough to gain an investor and trader attention. I do believe that this is going to go lower, so we could see a bounce. It's going to be temporary. I think it may come up towards 687 to 690, but I'm not sure that we're going to go on just yet to see new all-time highs. I think there's still a lot of resistance to the upside right now. So let's say that that's the case, and we continue to see a summer slump going into August as we approach NVIDIA earnings. I'm still looking for this to come in towards that 200-day SMA that you pointed out, and it could still continue a little bit lower. I personally think that we might start seeing bottoming around 630 to 640 if we do not recover soon. So that would line up with some of the negative headline risk that we're seeing with NVIDIA right now. They apparently just had an employee that was arrested in Taiwan over the SMCI chip smuggling. So that could further impact one of the largest tech names in the Qs, as well as additional ones.
Also, don't
Yeah.
forget, Jensen is talking with the Trump administration recently
Yes.
about some of those export controls. So there might be news coming out of that regardless, but that's a really good mention of the NVIDIA employee detained there in Taiwan. Okay, so you think that this might come in lower. Now, as far as the
Yes.
timeline there, those NVIDIA earnings that you spoke of, that's going to be at the end of August. And
Yep.
then, of course, you've also talked about the midterms being one of these areas where maybe things might turn around. That's not going to be until the fall, until November. So
Mhm.
you're thinking, and you also said 640s there. That would be perfect for an overshoot here of the 20 or of the 200-day moving average, and then a quick recapture of that. Now, if we get that prior to the midterms, are you still thinking we could potentially move higher, or do we really have to wait for these to get out of the way?
Well, I'd still want to keep an eye on some of these memory names too. That is also pulling
Okay.
down the market. So if Nvidia has great earnings that cause it to rally, which hasn't been the seasonality for that stock lately. Usually in August they will run up into earnings, and after that earnings print, it's in the past years recently, basically since COVID, it's mostly gone either sideways or lower. So that could be something we end up seeing here with Nvidia. With regard to
And
some of the
really quickly before we move on, sorry, but
Sure.
regarding NVIDIA, this is basically sitting right at the 202. In fact, it's held
Mhm.
it so far. These earnings are going to be very important. I think if you
Yes.
hold it, this probably trades up and maybe makes an attempt to break this 213, 214 area. If not, we probably gap beneath this, and then we'll see where we end up going next. Now, which memory name did you want to start with?
Well, we can look at either SNDK or Micron.
Let's start with SanDisk here.
Okay. So this one of the high flyers that saw massive rotation out of it is lost more than 50% off the highs now. And this is also heading down towards its 200-day SMA. It's also getting to be in a oversold state here. We haven't gotten beneath 30 RSI yet, but we are quickly approaching that. So if this continues lower, I certainly would be looking at that particular level, the 200-day SMA, as well as 900. I think 900 has a good area of support from previous price action back in April. That once we broke into that area, it went sideways and held above 900 before it finally moved higher. So 900 does stand out as a support level in SNDK, as does the 200-day SMA.
Yeah, I think this is going to the 200. The 200 is at 827 and a half down there about, so it's probably going to be in the 830s by the time the price gets down there if this does continue. I got to be honest, if this gets down and holds the 200, I'm a buyer there for a trade on SanDisk. We've heard plenty from the companies that the demand is for compute is crazy. It's not going away. These guys are still booked up in terms of how much they can produce. Memory prices are still high. So I think it probably is worth a stab at this if it does come in and hold that 200. Let's also take a look at Micron. This chart, not as bad as SanDisk, at least in terms of the pullback. In fact, it looks like it's doing its absolute best to try and hold on to 800 here, maybe even make a move back up to the 50, which has been rejecting it. That value is at 958. What do you think about Micron? Do you think we actually break down here, or do we make a move back towards that 50-day?
Well, in May, we had this sideways consolidation, this back and forth of trading throughout that month before we finally broke over 800 and went higher. So we are down at a support area. It's the top of that consolidation. So I would expect this to be a bit of demand zone for Micron, but it also does look like it's kind of lagging SNDK in terms of where it's
Yes, it
ultimately
does.
going. So this may also still come back in, but I think you have a little bit more support in the 700s for this to maybe get a reversal that turns it around and tries to reclaim some higher prices. But like SNDK, I also think this one could end up coming in more. I just don't know if it's going to make it all the way to the 200-day SMA. It could, and if it does, it would line up with a 515 level that I've had here that was previously a breakout spot. So that would be unfortunate for any holders over 1,000 for Micron, but it does look like this is still in a weakened state, and it could come in some lower. But we'll see if it can hold up in that consolidated area back from May.
Yeah, one more thing. We have a gap fill that fills down here at about 759, depending on where you draw your line. That's not far away from where the price is. So if it doesn't make it down to that 200-day, this might be another area to try along if it's able to hold or peak below and reclaim. Last thing I just want to mention here real quick is going to be SK Hynix. This was the recent memory IPO. We don't have a lot of data for this one, obviously. This, to my eye, sure looks like this is going to keep rolling over. At this point, I'm more inclined to trade SanDisk and Micron than I am to take a stab here at SKNY. There's all SKHY, excuse me, SK Hynix. There's also the story about the SK Hynix CEO and the divorce and the payout and all of that. And I don't know a whole lot about that, but it sounds really bad. And I think I've got better targets in this memory space anyway. So for me, at least for right now, SK Hynix is a pass. I would focus my energy on Micron and SanDisk instead.
And there is an additional headline risk with these memory names with the emergence of a new memory maker out of China, CXMT. So just thought that would be worth mentioning that that is putting additional pressure on the downside of these memory names. But I ultimately think that this is just if these CXMT memory chips are any good, it's going to create some good competition among the memory names, and I think that's ultimately healthy. So
Yeah, I
we'll
agree
see.
with you on that. Those dynamics really good. One more thing, if you're not bearish on tech, I think there's a chart out here that's executing alongside trade right now. Sure looks to me like Google came into its 200-day moving average. This is GOOG. Came in, held its 200-day moving average. Now it looks like we have a gap fill back up to about the 340s. We also have the 20-day at 349 and the 50-day at 359. So if you are not bearish on tech and you're still looking for a tech name to trade, this Google gap fill to the upside looks like a pretty good one. Looks like it's underway, especially with today's candle. All right,
I,
Joe, really good breakdown here on tech. Thanks very much. Join us for part two, where we think some of the tech money is rotating into. If you have any tech names or stocks that you want to see covered, drop them in the comments below and we'll take a look at those charts and come up with some trading ideas. Joe, thanks very much. I'll catch you next time.
See you later.